Hello, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Luke Dhume, and this is the 8th episode of the Luke Dhume Show. I hope you enjoy. Today, we're filming on Thursday, May 14th, and we've got a few things to talk about. First off, I got my hands are kind of black. I got some dye on there because, I work at a feed store and mulch dye. So, that's just why my hands are black. But we're back. We're back, and we're going to be bringing you the news tonight. We got three major things that we're going to talk about. First is going to be the election, the Republican primary election that was held last Tuesday. And then we're going to be talking about the assassination attempt on the White House that happened a few weeks ago. And then we're going to be talking about the war in Iran. Give them a little update. It's been a few weeks since I've been here. Last week, I had a wedding that I was going to go to, or that I did go to on my filming night. So I didn't get a chance to film, and, I've been busy. School ended, so I'm on summer break. So we're locked in now, and we're going to be coming to you more consistently, bringing you the news and all this great stuff. Okay, so the first thing we got to get into is this primary election. It was the Ohio Republican primary, and, like I said, it was held a couple weeks ago, and the two major candidates were Vivek Ramaswamy and Casey Puch. And I interviewed Casey Puch. It's kind of outdated to watch the interview now, but, it was a pretty good interview. And on a few different platforms, it got a few 100,000 views. And, yeah, so here's kind of the problem. He won 80%. Vivek did around 80%, and Casey Puch won in the teens, and there were a few for another candidate or something like that didn't really matter. It didn't really equate to anything much. But here's the thing. He started the campaign in December, okay? So it was about 5 months of campaigning that he was able to do. And he raised, I think $150,000, which is, pennies in a primary campaign for a governor. But it was very winnable. This campaign, this primary, was very winnable for Casey Puch, but there was a few things that he didn't do and a few things that we got to take lessons from. I didn't agree with, some of the stuff that he did during the campaign, a few of the strategies that he had, but it was winnable because, there was literally no appetite for Vivek, and that's shown in the votes, okay? If somebody does no campaign events and they raise no money, and they've got huge stuff going on, and they win almost 20% of the vote, being a grassroots, no name guy before the campaign, and that's a huge deal. And there's people saying that this is a great thing, but the thing about this, I'm all for trying something, failing, trying again, and then failing and trying again, until you make it. But with something like this, especially in politics, you really want to win. That's kind of the object. And if you're not prepared to go the distance and do everything that you can to win, then there's really no point in trying in the first place. So here's my problem about his campaign. He didn't do any events. Okay, that's the major thing. If he, like I said, I was telling people weeks before the actual primary voting happened, I was saying, he's not doing any events. Literally, all he has to do is say the same things that he was saying in December and January, which is no more. We gotta put a stop to H-1Bs. We gotta stop the data centers. We got to put Ohioans first, put Americans first, and stuff like that. And we gotta bring down prices and stuff like that. All he had to do was say that. He didn't even have to say any specific policy stuff. There was just no appetite for Vivek. All he had to do was say that stuff over and over and over again, and do 2 to 3 campaign stops all over the state every week, and he probably would have won the primary. Because Vivek, a lot of stuff that he said, he wants to make Ohio the next Silicon Valley, and he wants to, everybody's saying that he's in favor of H-1Bs and everything else, and, everybody's we really don't want to vote for Vivek, but nobody actually knew who Casey Puch was. He didn't do any campaign events. So I'm thinking, dude, if you want to win, you got to do campaign stops. I was talking to somebody, And we were, reviewing what Trump has done and how he's gotten so much success that he has. And he, like everybody knows, he is a workhorse. He's always working hard, especially during campaign season. So he's doing at least 2 to 3 campaign events months and months before. And then, coming into the month before the election, he's doing one every single day or multiple a day. You're seeing him all the time, speeches, rallies, everything going on. Casey Butch really, he didn't do any of that. Like, all you got to do is pull up to a Walmart. It doesn't take any money to do that. He designed a car that gets 100 miles a gallon, okay? So all he's got to do is drive all over the country and be like, hey, I'm going to be here, this date, everybody pop out. Do that a bunch of times. And if he's saying stuff that people like, it'll just grow and grow and grow. And that's the thing, you got to put the work in. And the thing about it is, like, there was a point where I was like, man, I could really focus my show and all my attention and everything trying to get him elected. But I'm like, if he's not going to do a lot of campaign stops and try to actually get this going and actually try to win, then I'm not going to put in the full effort that I was able to put in to try to get him elected, because the effort and the energy has to come from the top, okay? It has to come from the top. He has to be working harder. He's got to be doing more things. He's got to have more ideas. He's got to be, doing everything that he can to try to get himself elected. And then all of his staffers, all the people who are supporting him, it just trickles down from there. And that's how you make a movement. It has to come from the top. If you think about, the Trump movement or any other campaign that has worked historically, especially like a populist movement, there's been a central figure, and that central figure is putting in more effort, having more ideas, being, a more cult of personality than anybody else, okay? It's not anybody, saying, hey, do this, do this, do this. There are people that are doing that, but the main person is the guy at the top, is the guy who's trying to get elected. It's the central figure, the head, the one getting elected. So it has to come from the top, and, if he doesn't want to do, like, the work to actually get elected, then, nobody else is really going to push as much as they would if he would have done those things. And, it being like a grassroots type of thing, he was, posting during the campaign, he's like, I've still got my job to do and stuff like that, or I've still got to make a living, and my wife is pregnant and everything else. And I'm like, dude, if you've got to take care of that stuff, then, and if that's going to take priority, then are you really serious about winning in the first place? If you're trying to win a campaign, especially in like a movement that gathers people together and be like, hey, our system is corrupt, we're gonna try to fix it, you gotta put all your focus and your effort into that. And that's, I didn't see a lot of that from his campaign, and that's a lot of reason I think why it didn't have the success that it could have. And it could have had a lot of success, but, now we're stuck with 2 options, Vivek and Amy Acton. We're going to see how this election plays out. And, we'll just have to see what happens. We'll keep you updated on that, and we'll keep you updated on all the events and everything that's happening during the campaign. All right, our second story. It happened a few weeks ago, 1.5, 2 weeks ago. So, it's kind of old news, how fast the news goes through right now. But there was a major assassination attempt during, I think it was, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, I think it was. But it was some event in some hotel. And basically some guy's like, I'm going to try to assassinate the president and, half his cabinet. And he wrote a manifesto about it and everything else. And it's just, a bunch of babble about how, he hates Trump and everything else. One thing that we got to realize and that we got to keep in mind is that politics and, like democracy and, our republic and everything else, it is in the place of violence, okay? So instead of having war and just like killing each other all the time, we're going to talk about stuff and make laws and make order so that people don't kill each other and that we can have like an actual structured society. But when those structures start to break down, that's when violence appears, because if politics is in the place of violence and like our political structure and like, our institutions are in the place of violence, if they're keeping that down, if those start to crumble, then the violence is going to rise up. So that's the first thing about this. Second thing we got to realize is that when we're telling people over and over and over again, hey, our government, your government officials hate you and they're all pedophiles and, there's nothing you can do. Over and over and over again, it's going to get to some people and it's going to drive them crazy. And they're going to be like, well, my life sucks regardless. Might as well try to, mitigate the problem, quote unquote. But here's the thing about it. So some of those things can be true. There can be immense corruption in the government, and there can be, like $100 gallon gas, and then, there can be you can't get a living wage at a job, or, you don't have any health care and everything else, and all these problems. But if you're feeding all those problems, and you hear people, the talking heads are always talking like this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem, and your vote doesn't count. Your vote doesn't matter. There's nothing you can do. Our elections are rigged, and also there's gonna be violence. That's what's gonna happen. But here's the difference between this show and a few other shows that you see and all those other ones is that there is something you can do. I'm empowering you. I'm telling you, listen, you may be in a bad situation right now, but first and foremost, you need to dedicate yourself to God, or at least look into it. You need, and Jesus Christ, of course, I'm not just going to say flipping Jesus Christ. Okay. But, what was I saying? Yeah, you need to dedicate yourself to that. You need to try to make your situation better. You may be dealt a bunch of bad cards, but there's always something you can do to try to make your situation better. But then also your vote does matter. That's why I'm doing this right now, to try to change the problems that we have and to try to mitigate them and make the problems better so that there is a release for all the problems that you have. So if you're telling somebody, hey, everything is bad right now and it's not going to get any better, and your government and the officials are, like I said, all pedophiles and they all hate you and they're just trying to make your situation worse and screw you, and your vote doesn't matter and there's nothing you can do and you're going to live like this forever and you're going to die. Okay, if you're telling people that, they're obviously, if they listen to that enough, they're going to be like, well, what the freak? Why why not? But the problem, the difference about it, like I was saying, is that you do matter. Your life does matter. Your decisions do matter. And there are things that you can do to improve the government, to improve society, to help yourself and others around you. And, that's kind of the message of this show, which is, to dedicate yourself, become as smart as you can. And, if you're going to become invested in politics and you're going to pay attention to that a lot, then you need to try to make a change. Other than that, it's you try to help yourself and help others. But if you're going to become really invested in politics and follow it a lot, then you want to try to change. You can't just, I tell people this all the time, you can't complain about something without presenting a solution. So everybody can complain, everybody can talk, everybody can yap about it. This is bad, this is bad, this is bad about their government, about their job, about anything else. But if you're not also presenting a solution, what does all that talking do? It does nothing. It doesn't help, okay? So for me, in my position, I see the problems, I talk about the problems, but my solution, okay, is to become elected and to try to fix it from being elected, and to also, inform you guys about, different political concepts and tell you about the news and everything else. So, what can the normal person do who's not trying to get elected? You can, like I said, dedicate yourself to God, become as smart as you can, read, try to make money, try to make your situation better, because there's always something you can do, okay? There's you may think your government is overarching and everything else. In a lot of ways it is, but there's always something where you can help your situation. There's always different moves that you can make. So don't ever despair and lose hope and be like, your vote doesn't matter or anything else. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but I digress. It's one thing that you also can do is, help support, this movement. If I'm saying anything that you guys like, and if I'm, somebody that you think that shares the same values as you, wanting to put Americans first and everything else, then you can, like I said, like, comment, share, subscribe, everything else. But yeah, for you in your position, dedicate yourself to God. Try to help your situation as much as you can. Help others around you. Love your family. Love your friends. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's like don't believe like all the hype about like there's nothing you can do about your situation, because there's always something. You can always help yourself and help others in a way. Okay, but the third thing that we're going to talk about is the war in Iran. And basically there's pretty much no updates. Like gas got to like $5 a gallon where I'm at, and it's down to like 4.5 now. Not that much of a change. But here's the thing about it. The reason that it's so high and how it spiked so much is because there were a lot of ships that were in the sea that had left the strait, and then the war started. They were in the sea. They finally got into port, used up all their oil, and now, there's none coming to the ports, as they were. So gas is spiking because of that. And then also another reason is because Iran was still selling oil. Okay, so they were still getting oil out. Some of their allies were getting oil still. So that, kept prices down as much as they could. But the United States blockaded Iran's ships too. So now no ships are coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. And so, like I've said before in the show, oil is on a global market, okay? So if oil is more sparse in Japan, it's going to be more sparse throughout the entire world. If it's more sparse in Europe, it's going to be more sparse throughout the entire world, because like the price of oil is on a global market. It's on a global market. So basic supply and demand states if there's less in the market, then the prices are going to go up, because the demand is, going to stay the same or it's going to rise. And if there's less, then the prices are going to go up. So that's another reason why the prices have continued to go up, in case you guys were wondering. There was a kind of a plan by the Trump administration and the United States military to try to go in and give humanitarian aid to the people stuck on the ships. And Iran's like, hey, you're not going to do that. So they gave it up in like a day. There's been some diplomacy going on. It hasn't really gone anywhere. The United States has still got our hard lines, no enrichment, the proxies, the missiles, the Strait of Hormuz, and everything else. And Iran has still got the same hard lines. Hey, we're going to keep the Strait of Hormuz. We want reparations. We're going to keep funding our proxies, and we're going to keep on the enrichment and everything else. So yeah, I said from the beginning that this war was a foolish idea and we should have never been in it, but they didn't listen to me and they went in anyway. And like I said, we're kind of stuck here, because if the United States just pulls out and be like, whatever, we tried, whatever, we're just going to go. Iran's going to retain control of the strait. They're going to keep charging a toll through it, and that's going to rebuild their country. And also, that is 100%, 150,000%. I don't care what anybody else says. That is a loss for the United States, because they did not have control of the Strait of Hormuz before the war started, and now they would have control of the Strait of Hormuz, okay? So they've gained territory, they've gained stuff on it, they've improved their situation. They control this major global waterway. Now, if the United States pulls out, so what are we going to do? Just pull out, or we can escalate, which is we can start bombing them again, or we can have a ground invasion, or we can people have even talking about nuking a few months or probably a few weeks ago, but I don't think the nuke. I think that's pretty much out of the question. The ground invasion would be a total disaster. They can start bombing them again, but it's not going to do anything. It didn't do anything for, the month and a half that we did it. And so really the only way out is in more intense diplomatic situations, or an escalation, or the United States pulling out, which, there's really not a good solution here, which is why we never should have done it in the first place, which is why we never should have went in. We never should have started this in the first place. And I said that because, predicted all this. I knew all this was going to happen. And I laid out some of those reasons. You know, it was my second show where I said, hey, the United States should not do this. We need diplomacy, not military intervention. But, you know, we all know how that went. So we're, you know, pretty much no update again. So we're going to see what happens. We're going to keep you updated. And yeah, that's pretty much the 3 stories that we have. We're going to close out the show by going in Luke chapter 8. Starting in verse number 22. Basically, Jesus and his disciples are on a ship, okay? Or like a boat. Now it came to pass on a certain day that he went into a ship with his disciples, and he said unto them, let us go over unto the other side of the lake, and they launched forth. But as they sailed, he fell asleep, and there came down a storm of wind on the lake, and they were filled with water and were in jeopardy. And they came to him and awoke him, saying, Master, Master, we perish. And then he arose and rebuked the wind and the raging of the water, and they ceased, and there was a calm. And he said unto them, where is your faith? And they, being afraid, wondered, saying one to another, what manner of man is this? For he commandeth even the winds and the water, and they obey him. So basically, they're on the ship, and a big storm rises up, and they're taking on water, and they're like, yo, Jesus, we're going to die. We're all going to die. What do we do? And he wakes up, and he's like, be quiet. And the whole storm stops, and he's like, where's your guys' faith? And they're like, oh my gosh, what kind of man is this right here, you know? It reminds me of a song that, you know, my church has been singing. It's like, okay, here's how the lyrics go. It goes, let go my soul and trust in him. The waves and winds still know his name. And even in any situation that you're in, any problem, you know, that you're facing, like your relationship with your friends or your family, or problems at work, or like financial struggles that we're all going through right now, or anything that like you can be facing, it's like these are all storms in our life. And like this is, you know, kind of a overused corny analogy, but it's just so true. And sometimes, a lot of times, we need reminded of it. We can sit here and we can take on water and everything can, you know, happen, and we can worry. But all we got to do is go to Jesus and say, hey, you know, I'm like, stuff is going bad right now. And we just got to have faith in him that the waves and winds they still know his name, and they still obey him. And he, you know, has control over, you know, everything. So you just got to put your faith in him and not in anything else, because, you know, I bet it says a ship, you know, the ship it was seaworthy when they went out. So you can't put your faith in the ship because, you know, storm can come and take on water. You can't put your faith in a job because you can get fired. You can't put your faith in, you know, a relationship because it can end. You can't put your faith in a house because it can burn down. You can't put your faith in your body and what you can do because you can break your leg and be out of work for months. What are you going to put your faith in? What are you going to believe in? Where's your rock? And the only thing that is constant, the only thing that you really can put your faith in eternally is Jesus Christ. He's the only thing, he's the only one, he's the only central figure that's going to be there no matter what. And he's the only one that's going to love you. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what you've been through. It doesn't matter what you've said, anything. And it really doesn't matter. He loved you and he died for you at your worst moment. Don't ever, ever, ever forget that. And all you got to do is put your faith in him. You call out to him, trust in him. Or at least look into it, because, you know, apart from all the amazing things, it's just very, very interesting. And it's very, very compelling. So, you know, if you haven't looked into it, I strongly suggest it. It's the most important thing and, you know, the best thing that you could ever do. It's the best decision you can ever make, by far. Like, I can sit here and I can make a billion, I could, become a congressman. I can, start a YouTube channel, everything. There's nothing that will ever fulfill you like a relationship with Jesus Christ. Because like I said, if you put your faith in your money, like you could lose your money, like inflation, like your money's depreciating. How are you going to put your faith in your money? Okay. You're going to put your faith in gold. It's a rock at the end of the day. There's really, nothing in your life that really is constant besides your relationship with Christ. There's nothing that you can consistently put your faith in throughout your entire life, no matter what, besides that. So keep that in mind. I hope you guys have a great week. I'm going to definitely try to be more consistent. I've had, a lot of requests to be more consistent from now on. And especially since school's over and we got, a lot more free time, I'm going to try to. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, share it. Tell your friends about it. Tell your family about it. Let's make this movement. Let's make this dream a reality. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about, everything that I've said. I love you guys. I really, really appreciate every single view, every single like, every single comment. It truly means the world to me. So you guys have a great day. And I'll see you next time.